Welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Rana, and I'm happy to be joined tonight by Mike Alewitz, a local agitprop muralist, who's been on the show before, but there are some new things going on in his work, and so welcome back, Mike.
Thank you. It's great to be here. There's always much to talk about as we slide towards the abyss of the disaster that is capitalism. So there's always lots going on.
Yeah, and at the same time, you and I being not really young people, we're sliding towards the point that it's someone else's problem.
Yes.
And what are we going to do to help that?
Global warming for me means more spring days, but it is actually frightening because, of course, we didn't have one big storm this winter. It's scary because, but it's going to be a problem that other generations are going to face, that young people today are going to face. They have enormous, enormous challenges ahead of them, far greater than we did.
Yeah, we go to the West Coast and visit pretty much every summer, and I think it was 2 summers ago we ended up driving from the Bay Area up to Oregon, and it was July, and Mount Shasta had no snow on it. And if you think about, a place that is so dependent in summer that snowmelt is their source of water, it really is scary.
The whole world is nightmarish because it's this carbon-based march towards suicide. And they just keep getting, it's not even like they're trying to cut back on this stuff. It's just more and more of the same. They open up more and more drilling. And anyway, we should probably deal with something a little smaller than that.
Right. It's always a little less daunting to talk about things we can do in our own backyard. Or in your case, maybe your front yard.
I don't have much of a yard, fortunately. But we could talk about what it means to paint a whale,
True.
In the midst of this carbon-based madness.
In the whaling city. We will get to that,
yes,
too. So you moved into a building on Federal Street 8-9 years ago, and it's now known as Red Square. People who are driving down Broad Street can't really miss it. When you get towards that Hempstead Street intersection, you see the big red cube. So maybe you can show a picture of, we have some photos of Red Square, and then you can talk a little bit about what's happening there now and what the plans are for the future.
Well, I can start.
Start talking, and we'll get the pictures
Red
when
Square,
we get them.
For people who live, who know New London, it was the old drop-in learning center on Federal Street. And at one time it was the Coit family, very wealthy, prominent family that made their fortunes from whaling and child labor and the West Indies trade, which was the euphemism for slave trade. They don't use the word slavery. But it was an old building. It was in disrepair, so it was something I could get, and I used it for my residence and studio. And over time, because I had so much space, I began to put up displays. The first and most important one was, and I think you're going to show a slide of it, was a mural that was censored by the Museum of the City of New York. And all the stuff that's up there has mostly been censored. I am the most censored artist in the world that I know of, and all my work that's on display with the pictures and everything is not really. It's been destroyed because of the kind of work that I do. But anyway, we've been upgrading it. It's still just my residence and private studio, but we're trying to move it towards becoming a nonprofit and really establishing it as a resource for people to use.
And we have some pictures of the inside of the building. Maybe we can kind of go through them. It's not a lot of pictures, but maybe you can talk.
Well, you can see, just looking at this, for example, these are displays. This is one of the front rooms when you walk in. You can see there's mine workers. That long strip is actually a 100-foot long banner that I painted for the mine workers during the Pittston mine strike. There's banners and displays about the Labor Party, the effort to build a Labor Party in the 90s. And then all of those pictures along the wall are pictures of different banners that I've painted for unions, for strikes, because I was a sign painter. So these are professionally lettered signs, and so there's a lot of history there. And any one of those images, any one of those, you can talk about a great deal. The top image there, for example, the black cat. Well, what does the black cat mean? Black cat's an old labor symbol, and it basically symbolizes militancy. Groups like the IWW still use the black cat. But what I do is I use these images to help. People wouldn't know what they mean, but this is a chance to explain, because we have to relearn our history. Our history has been suppressed. The history of the working class has been totally suppressed in this country. On that top thing in the back there, you can't really see it, there's a mural I painted in Mexico City. And it has the portraits of Albert Parsons and Lucy Parsons. And when I ask people if they know what that is, nobody knows what it is. And then I say, well, do you know what May Day is? And most people don't know what May Day is. May Day, May 1st, is the international holiday of the working class. Now, a lot of radicals now are kind of getting that. The whole world celebrates May Day. Workers in Russia don't work. In Mozambique, they don't work. In Mexico, they don't work. It's a holiday. It's a celebration of the fight for the 8-hour day in Chicago and the anarchists that were framed up during that and executed during that struggle. So we've been so robbed of our history, we don't know this. And a lot of what I paint, and the reason a lot of it's been censored, is because it reveals these truths that have been so repressed and suppressed. Anyway, so that's a studio, and there's a library, and it's going to be a resource center. This was a 6-story mural I painted in Manhattan that was censored by the Socialist Workers' Party, which was at one time a very proud revolutionary party and is now just a wacky cult.
Well, you had several situations where you painted murals for groups that later became much more staid, and that was the end of your mural.
Yes, I have the distinction of being able to be censored and have the mural destroyed by the group that's sponsoring me. So, well, the way this started was I was commissioned to paint this mural at the Museum of the City of New York by the Puffin Foundation, which is a left-wing foundation. And when they asked me, I said, nobody's going to let me put a piece of my work in a major museum in New York. And they said, no, we're paying for this. They paid a couple $1 million to create this gallery and everything, so it's going to go in. Well, They had a very authoritative blue ribbon kind of committee that approved my sketches and everything. And then the head of the museum, who was tied into the central financial interests in the city, said, "No, we're not going to put this up on political grounds. We're not going to do this." And all kinds of wacky reasons. MLK was in it, you know. It was like, at any rate, of course, then the commission that had so universally approved it, and the foundation immediately collapsed, and that was the end of that. But since so much of my work had been destroyed, I had the foresight. Instead of painting it on site, which I would normally do, I painted it on canvas panels. And that's the only reason it still exists. So I have it. I put it up in Red Square. It's not together as it should be, but it's there in pieces. And that was the beginning of, and then I started putting other things up. P9 mural, the Meatpackers mural that was destroyed. The Mine Workers banner that I was commissioned to do and then was suppressed. The Pathfinder mural that I directed and was suppressed. The Malcolm X mural in Northern Ireland that was in part sponsored by Sinn Féin, who immediately destroyed it upon my exit from Belfast.
They didn't wait very long.
No, they did not. Well, it was clear when I was doing it that they did not like what I was doing, because it was critical of the idea. Sinn Féin was at that time a strictly nationalist group. And I painted Malcolm X because Malcolm was a nationalist, but he was also an internationalist. So I thought this is the perfect symbol for this. Because at night, like, kids are throwing, the Catholic kids and the Protestant kids are throwing rocks at each other, and, you know, there's all this stuff going on. And I'm like, you know, why don't you guys work together against the employers, which is the real problem? But they did not want me to put that idea forward. So, and a lot of the projects I've done have been a little problematical like that, because they're political, but they're also used to try to influence the direction of the revolutionary and the labor movements. So I don't want to get into it too much, but...
Yeah, well, it is clear, though, that in addition to being an artist, you have been a teacher.
I directed the only mural program in the country, which happened to be at Central Connecticut State University. And I did that for 16 years. Again, there's over 100 murals on the Central Connecticut State University campus. It is an amazing collection there's murals about wars and occupations and substance abuse and women's issues. And the same thing. No one knows it's there. The school administration kept it totally hidden and quiet from the rest of the world. It was don't ask, don't tell. They let us paint the murals. They didn't put them in the publications. They didn't create a program. People would have come from all over the world to work there. But we kept painting murals, and a lot of people were trained in how to paint murals. And when I walked past the creation of the Weiland mural, I just happened to walk past it, I think, twice, and it was like they would not have passed my course. They would not have passed my course. The way they were working, well, first of all, it was unsafe. It was unsafe. They had a bunch of people up on a lift. They had electrical wires running all over the place. They were not wearing protective gear. They were spraying paint, and they were not wearing they had kids up there, and they weren't. Well, paint is poison. I mean, you know, even what they call the non-toxic, if you're spraying it and you're breathing it in, very unsafe, and a very bad example to people. I would have thrown them out of my class for that. That would have been it. You don't
You're
work
not
safely.
the mayor of New London, though.
Well, and the way they were painting it, people are going to be very upset because it's going to fade very quickly. It's going to fade very quickly. When you spray paint, I use spray guns, but before you do that, you have to put down paint that's opaque. You roller in paint or you brush in paint so that you have a thick layer of the paint. Because when you spray, it's a very thin layer of paint, and it's going to fade rapidly because in the sun, paint fades. It's actually the binder that it causes the problem. But you don't just spray onto a new wall, and because it'll soak in, and then the sun will affect it. So it's. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
And we'll talk a little more about like what the purpose of this we do have a lot of public art in New London, and it's all over the place, really.
Well, New London has a lot of very fine artists in it because it's relatively inexpensive, and people have gravitated down. There's a lot of very good artists in this town, and they paid Weiland that project was $275,000. And they could have had 10 working artists who are very good, much better than Weiland, to paint a couple dozen mills. And it would have transformed the town. And it would have provided work that people need as artists. And it would have created a whole environment for making public art. You could have had all different kinds of art presented. But like most things like this, the money that is given to the arts in the United States is little crumbs. It's little crumbs from the trillions of dollars that go to the war machine. You get these little crumbs here. And even then, it goes to a millionaire. If you look at who gets large grants, for example, the Lyman Allen Museum, they get a lot of our tax dollars that come from working people. Then when they have shows, they're the only gallery I know that I've ever seen that charges people to come to an opening. And really what that is it's just saying we don't want you people from New London coming up here. That's all it is, in their little bubble up on the hill. This university, it's one of the most expensive colleges. It's one of the most expensive in the country, and they charge. Well, there's only one reason for that. So even these little crumbs that they give to the arts is used to really prevent people from making art. Because if you withhold money from the working artists, then how are they supposed to make a living? And what happens is it affects the kind of art that they make and whether they can even make art, because if they can't make a living, then you have to do something else. I mean, it's a giant systemic problem of capitalism. And as upset as I can get about these things, as you can tell because I'm ranting about it, it's important to keep in mind that while we're fighting over these few $1,000s for art, across the river, billions and billions of dollars go to a death machine that is a horrific nightmare, that you make submarines that can destroy the world. It's insane. And that is the real problem. That's the real problem.
Well, it seems like everything has kind of become a commodity these days. And, I'm on the Planning and Zoning Commission, so I'm into like how we use our land. And one thing that does concern me, I really kind of don't mind that all these apartment buildings are going up on what were empty lots. If there are people who want to live there, that's okay. But I do worry that, you said you moved into New London because 10 years ago it was affordable.
Oh, yeah.
That nowadays, I think a lot of artists, not just visual artists, but theater artists, musicians, they're not finding reasonable housing or rehearsal space or studio space or, performance or exhibition space. Those cheap spaces are kind of getting gobbled up. And that to me is what I feel like I miss. I'm from Philadelphia. So I kind of like that kind of gritty, creative atmosphere.
Well, it's disappearing in Philadelphia, too. What's happening here is a microcosm of what's happening across the country. Because what they're done is working people can't afford to live in the cities that have been renowned as cultural centers. You can't live in New York City if you're a young artist with no money. I mean, you can't, it's impossible. Or San Francisco or Los Angeles. And I've been here for less than 10 years. But when I came in, I could afford, I was working as a professor. I could borrow money and I could afford to buy an old building and fix it up. That's impossible. It's impossible now. You just can't do it. And that's true everywhere because of it's all part of the austerity drive of the ruling class. And one of the ways that it works is to drive down the standard of living of workers, which is done in a lot of different ways. You suppress the wages. You make people do piecework at a greater rate. You cut the wages essentially through inflation. And
you transfer a lot of the risk onto individuals.
Well, and you transfer all the money to people who already have all the money. I mean, all these tax cuts that go to billionaires, this is money that comes from us. Those of us that work for a living and actually produce something of use for humanity, which which the ruling class does not. There was a time when the ruling class, as brutal as it was, the robber barons and whatever, they put their capital into building something. So yes, they were ruthless, racist, genocidal, but they built railroads. They built cities. They built canals. Capitalism was different back then. Now, they just consume, and you can only consume so much. And one human being can only consume so much. These billionaires, multiple billionaires. If you took the money from the billionaires that live in Connecticut, which is one of the richest areas of the world,
right?
There are these people who have $7 or $10 billion. If you left them $2 billion, took the rest of it, which $2 billion you can't spend in a lifetime, you could have free education through the university level. You could have free health care. You could have affordable housing. All of these things would be possible, but not when you just give more and more to fewer and fewer. It's insane.
Yeah. And Connecticut's tax code is really terrible, which I was reminded of this past weekend when I did our taxes. And out of a twist of fate, we owed money to the federal government for the first time in a long time. We had to take all these IRA distributions, which counted as income for this year. So
let's get back to agitprop.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. But Connecticut, actually, we're getting money back. That was my only point.
Okay, I'm glad.
I'm not.
Here's the thing. Even with the taxes, right? We pay enormous amounts of what we produce. We pay enormous amounts back. And then they set it up so you get a little money back through your tax return, and you think you're getting something.
Yeah, no, it wasn't much. But it made me think that our tax system isn't progressive enough. If I was getting a refund, because I didn't need one. Anyway, so this archive, what I have now is a few just pictures of some of your art, which I believe only exists in archive.
No, this piece actually exists.
That one? Oh.
This is a 7-foot by 10-foot banner.
Wow.
That I painted for a group, the International Confederation of Energy and Mine Workers, who sponsored me to go to Chernobyl and paint and projects like that. And this actually exists, but it was I painted it for their founding convention. It's one of a series, but it's called Bureaucracy, and you can see the worker has these little bureaucrats sucking on. They're stuck on them like suckers. And then, well, I won't go into all the industry. But it was actually, they were supposed to hang in the AFL-CIO building, and they did for a couple days. And then Trump got... when we did a whole show on censorship, I had written down, that
your work, has been censored, bulldozed, sandblasted, all different ways that it's been suppressed.
It has.
The Rachel Corrie piece.
That's bulldozed. That was on the Rachel Corrie Peace Center in occupied in the occupied territories. That building way in the back is an Israeli center that where they torture people, which is legal in Israel. Well, you know about this. Anyway, this was knocked down.
I take it personally too.
That was destroyed. This is the Harriet Tubman series that was all censored in Baltimore. That little monument was painted over. The longer figure was supposed to go on the side of a building in Baltimore, and that was rejected. I don't want to get into this too much.
Yeah.
People who are interested in this stuff, here's the Malcolm X that I mentioned before, in the Ardoyne section of Belfast where the Troubles were. But people who are interested in this basically can go to, right now they could go to my Facebook page, which I have albums of these with the stories about them. We're going to be putting together a website. It's in the works, so we'll have a website for Red Square. And on April 30th, we're going to have a little open house with tours and stuff.
Oh, great.
Yeah, because it's May Day.
People have to, it's the day before May Day.
Yeah, May Day's Monday, so we're going to do it Sunday. But you have to RSVP because it's small groups. It can only take small groups at a time. But if you're interested in this kind of stuff, it's a great way to get a little bit of labor history. This was the mural that was supposed to go in the Museum of City of New York, and it's about 20 feet high and however long, and that's on display at Red Square. And
yeah, and I knew Weiland and the whales would come up, and when I saw this among the photos on Facebook, I just had to include it. So, how are your whales different from Weiland's whales?
Well, as you can appreciate that I had a small yard around there, and I gravelled it in because lawns are stupid. There's stupid waste. We're mimicking French royalty by having little pieces of grass out there. So it's gravelled in. Maria Colombo, who is an Argentinian artist, and I did this, and it's just a little design with the whale. We are in the whaling city. And this was once this is once a very rich town based on the slaughter of the whales. And then later, the whole area, the money went into, when the whale oil was no longer being used, a lot of it went into textile industry. There was a lot of textiles. There still is, the old buildings in New England.
We just moved.
Okay,
on.
We're
But
on to
yeah.
the whale. Well, listen, I have no beef with Weiland. He's worth, according to some things, he's worth $80 million. He does these whales. He's done 100 whales. It's not challenging art, in my opinion. It's not something. Around the corner from that there's murals that Troy Zauschny and Michael McNabney painted. That's an aquatic scene that's much more challenging and better art than this. There's even the one on the side of the hygienic.
The one across the street, the music one.
Yeah, well, to me,
better.
There's more. There's a little more to it, but none of these. It's a whale, and it's not really a very good whale. It's like.
Well, I guess my question is, and I don't expect you to have the whole answer to this, is we have quite a bit of public art in New London, and what's its purpose? And what should be its purpose, or what aspirationally could be its purpose?
What's happening now? When I moved to Connecticut in 2000 and directed the mural program at CCSU, Central Connecticut State University. and it was the only thing in the country. Now, after a couple of years, it was also at a time when street art was emerging. Spray can art really, and in New Britain, there were some fabulous working class spray can artists. And street art became the largest visual art movement in human history. And I started a course on street art. And when I started the course, I went to see online, what people were doing. And I discovered there was no course on street art. The largest...
Well, so it was just like a spontaneous upwelling?
It's working class. It's a working class form of art, just like rock and roll began as a working class form of art. But it's a global thing. If you Google street art Mozambique, you're going to get street art Mozambique. Wherever. Street art is everywhere. And yet I was the only course in the country. And that says it all right there, because it is this working class form of expression, and it's hard to commodify, although they're doing it. But basically, it's this outburst of working class expression. Spray can art, wild style lettering is abstract expressionism, but it's abstract expressionism painted in the streets. And it's illegal in most places. Art is illegal in most places in the United States, unless it's on a little rectangle that you can sell to somebody. And that's where the little rectangles come from. What's called paintings that they teach hundreds of thousands of people to do. Those began with capitalism. Prior to that, there were frescoes in the churches. There were public art. That was what painting was. But the capitalists have trouble with frescoes.
You can hang it on your home wall.
You can't sell it easily. You can't. It's not. That's where easel painting comes from. And so, under capitalism, that became the form of painting. And of course, there's great art that are painting. I'm not, but the fact of the matter is, most of human history, we didn't do the little rectangles. We did public art,
Starting from cave walls.
The first mural was the handprint and spitting berry juice over it. It was an airbrushed mural. It was an airbrushed mural with the name of who you are. It's the very same thing that spray can art began as, graffiti art. Same thing. Here I am, my name. It's like this, right? Same thing. See, that's it, because real art is like that. Real art, where you're really trying to make a connection with people, it has that quality to it. But I don't want to get too far into this.
Well, when you were talking, though, I kept thinking that, part of the issue is how we're perceiving the commons now. There hardly is a commons anymore. Even every wall is owned by by someone. So,
Well, what they've done is, in response to graffiti, it's like with music. Music has been the artistic expression of the working class in the United States. Rock and roll, the blues, jazz. We've given two things to the world: war and music. And the music is black music, primarily. That's where it comes from, although from a lot of different sources as well. And mural painting now, in response to wild style and graffiti and street art that was anti-authoritarian, basically, now they've tried to corral it and to co-opt it. And they've been very successful at that. And now what you have is every town wants murals. There's mural projects in every town. And every town, and we have thousands of towns, what happens is the local the local government says, let's have a mural about diversity, right? And so what happens is you get a wall, you get a bunch of kids together, and you paint some big heads. You have Malcolm X maybe, and you have a local congressman or whatever, and it's just the most dreadful stuff. And what it's designed to do is to give the appearance that you are doing something to make power more diverse, but really what you're doing is you're preventing that from happening. Mary Delesur, the great writer, had an expression. They said that for the artists, they want you to perfume the sewers. So, you see, they want you to put little pretty murals in these towns that are dying, or where people can't afford housing, or people are lined up at soup kitchens. Nothing is happening for those people, but you put up a diversity mural. And this is done in a lot of different ways. Anytime the word diversity is used by government officials, it usually is something to prevent diversity.
Well, we see this. I get really frustrated in New London because we see it seems almost equivalent to the proclamations that we hear come out, and we have that one intersection with rainbow stripes in it. But also, proclamation racism is a public health crisis. But when you look at where you're spending money in the budget, which is, to me, a better clue of what you really care about than what you say, you're not seeing the money spent for, like, diversity, for example.
Well, and that's, again, it's the little crumbs. You see, we're fighting over the little crumbs. The fundamental problem that faces every town in this country, that faces every community in this country, you cannot take the entire resources of society and put it into a war machine. That is where everything goes. That's why Electric Boat is going to hire thousands of people to create more nuclear submarines that are just these monstrous things that can destroy the world. And, they make little cartoon characters about the submarines and we're the submarine town. And people are not allowed to think about what it really is. When you see that submarine going down the river there on a nice sunny day where people are out sailing and kayaking and whatever, that is a horrendous, horrible, monstrous death machine. And until we create a society that stops spending trillions of dollars on war and puts resources into things that human beings can use, affordable housing or free housing, free education, healthcare. I mean, the reason we don't have universal healthcare in this country, the reason students who go to the university go into debt for the rest of their lives when European students don't have to pay for school. The reason that people have to work 2 or 3 jobs, all of that is totally preventable simply by reassigning the resources of society. And that's what I paint about in all my little ways. Just, that's what my work points out. And that's why they weren't going to put it on the wall of the Museum of the City of New York. It's got the little piggies counting the money and everything.
Well, I have to tell, when you mention all of those, I was a kibbutz member for 4 years, and every year I have a friend who's a young teacher. He teaches history. He invites me to come to his class once a year and talk about my experience living there, and I guess in a way my evolution of how I feel about that whole part of the country. But I do talk about what it was like to be a member of a socialist society. And there was one like teacher aide, I think, who, during the Q&A said, well, I mentioned anyone who's there, they get housing, they get health care, they get food, they get work, you know, they get work clothes, they basically get their needs. And she raised her hand and said, well, how was it paid for? And I said, the way we pay for like everything. There were orchards, there were, businesses in some, but the money went to providing the needs of the people who lived there.
Well, and if you look at it in a very isolated way, because
Right.
in reality, of course, the state of Israel is a giant military base for
Even more than the U.S.
yes, for the Western powers.
Yeah.
And I've painted in Israel and the occupied territories, and it's a nightmare for the Palestinian people and for Arab people. My sister worked on a kibbutz too. Yeah, you create
This was
these
in
little
1970s. Things have,
Yeah.
and I was made kind of rosy about it then, but there also seemed to be another path because there was no wall. The roads were all open, and then it got much worse and not much. So I won't go back.
Well, these things that people point to, these fake progressives like Bernie Sanders and people like that, they point to the Scandinavian countries and they say, well, see, this is very different. This is all based on human needs and whatever. No, it's not. It's based on a brutal, brutal imperialism that resulted in the deaths of millions of people in the southern part of the world. The riches that come to places like Belgium, for example, it was 5 million Africans killed in the Belgian Congo, and imperialism from countries, in the Scandinavian countries, they're invested in the war machine. The way the capitalists of those countries decided to go, they went in a little different direction than this country. They said, well, we'll keep the workers happy, we'll give them a little more so that we can continue to reap vast fortunes from raping the world. Whereas in this country, they don't have that subtlety, right?
No.
It's just, I'll steal everything that I can.
As a result, we actually have less stability than they do, perhaps.
We have, when you think about it, we have a very, very, it's really not a good life. People, you work, you're isolated, you're alienated. I mean, there's a reason that this country has the unique thing of mass shootings, because people are so alienated that they're shooting each other.
And they shoot themselves a lot, too.
Yes, and it's not because there's guns. It's because we have a brutal, alienated society. For a young person in the United States, every time they look at what their leaders are doing, it's always, we're going to resolve this with guns. We're going to resolve. We feel there's a problem with China. We'll go to war with China, right? We'll go to war with Iran. We'll invade Iraq. Well, what other conclusion are you going to draw than when you have a problem because somebody shortchanged you at Costco? Well, I'm going to go to
war with that person.
I'm going to go start shooting. And it's just a sign. I mean, it's almost daily. It's just a sign of the sickness, because this is a very, very sick society. It's a society that puts its worth based on money and celebrity. And, and this thing with the whale is a perfect example of this. Here, let's get the celebrity comes in and he paints something for 2 days, and it's $275,000. And, this is just a small example of it. And we have a very sick society. There is no easy solution to this. And the solution is an enormous project that has to be done if we're going to survive as a species. We must overthrow capitalism and establish a society based on human needs. Otherwise, we are going to go extinct or become something that is like turning the clock back on evolution to, because we're going to be living in the swamp eating
maybe
toads.
worse than feudalism. We have a few. Back to your archives,
Yeah,
because we have like less than 10 minutes left.
Well, we can wander off.
I think your student art was going to be also represented in the archives, correct?
There are three parts of my archives. As we were talking a little bit before the show, I think it's very important for those of us who are of the age that we participated in the civil rights movement, in the anti-Vietnam War movement, in the fight for reproductive rights. We saw victories. We won things. We were a minority that became a majority that forced the U.S. out of Southeast Asia. It changed the world. The emergence of the women's movement, which won the right to abortion, gay rights. All of these movements show that you can win, that you don't necessarily lose. And the lessons of how we did that is very important. And so I think people like me, I'm not a famous person. I'm not I was never, an exalted leader or anything. I was a worker who just became a socialist and therefore was able to make some change in my own way. You throw your little grains of sand. So I made agitprop art that was important for certain strikes and struggles, whatever. And it's important that we document this stuff. And so I've created archives. I have archives that are in Tamiment Library, the big labor library in New York at New York University, which has the hard copies of things. There's a digital library that's being created by the librarian at Central Connecticut State University that will become part of the National Archives. And Red Square has displays and things like that. So it's hopefully going to be out there. How do you organize a mural project that makes a contribution to a social struggle that isn't just fluff on a wall, that isn't just something pretty to look at, but that helps advance human solidarity, that helps change the world, that helps people begin to question things and begin to figure out, and that also makes you look back in history to see where our unions came from, where our right to speak out came from. All of these things, very important for people like us, activists of our generation, to write memoirs or establish archives, whatever, so that people can learn. I learned how to do things from an earlier generation of revolutionary socialists, people who led the Minneapolis Teamster strikes, the general strikes, came out of the labor movement, had organized mass struggles. We have to pass this stuff along. So it's important that we do whatever we can. However small it is, I think it's an important thing for us to do. And that's what I hope to do with our little thing at Red Square, kind of lucked into the building and put up the displays and stuff. And so it's not an institution at this point. It's an idea. But we can turn ideas into realities.
And this seems to be an important reality, as you and I are more or less the same age, and thinking about what we have to contribute to. It isn't the future generation. I mean, it's another generation that's really in charge now.
On April 30th, I'm gonna do. I always do my Kent State thing for May 4th,
right?
Because I was an eyewitness to the massacre. This year, I'm going to focus a little more on how we responded to the massacre at Kent State, because there was a national student strike, and there was a to some extent, coordinated national response to the massacres at Kent, Jackson, Augusta. Now, in Atlanta right now, there's a fight going on to stop Cop City. I won't get into what it's all about here, but the cops came in, broke up a concert, charged people with terrorism, killed a young activist, a brilliant young activist. And how do we respond to that? Why isn't there a nationally coordinated effort around this thing? Well, if we look back to earlier struggles, to the anti-war movement, or even to go back to the trade union, of the 1930s or whatever, then we can see how you do this. Because it's possible. We can win. We can stop Cop City. We can do that. It's winnable, and we need to do that. We need to win these things, because in the process of doing that, we will develop the confidence, the solidarity, the unity to fight and win fundamental changes.
Now we have 2 more minutes. So I was going to ask if we could go very quickly through the last slides with some student art, and we won't really have time to talk much about it, but
if people go to my Facebook page right now,
there are hundreds of
100 albums of all this stuff, and it will be in the archives, the National Archives, and it will be at Red Square. So
yeah, so let's just quickly go through them. And
yeah, these are not the best, but go
Oh well. We'll keep on going. There is one, that one you wanted to.
Well, yeah, this one. Okay, so this was a wonderful mural that was painted by a Muslim student, and it was about, if we can go back to it,
yeah.
Who's in charge?
Oh, keep talking because we only have a couple minutes, but yeah.
All right, let's not go into it. We had fights on campus about these things, and in her case, it showed a Muslim woman and it showed it was an expression about the results of the bombing and everything, and unfortunately, privileged college professors objected to it, and that's a whole other thing, which would require another hour of discussion.
Yeah, which we don't have right now.
No.
Oh, here we can get that last look at it, and we'll look at the last couple of slides in the last minute.
All of these require explanation, but you see, that's the thing. That's the thing about this stuff. You have to think about what's in there. You have to try to figure it out. You don't just stick a whale on the wall. There's nothing to think about. It's just a whale on the wall. Art should engage you.
Okay, and I ended with this one because I feel like solidarity is so hard to come by, but really what we need.
We will do it. I have a lot of confidence in young people today. We've had things like Occupy, Black Lives Matter, women's demonstrations, here and there. It's going to become generalized at some point, and it's going to be massive, and it's going to shake this country to the foundations. There's going to be a big fight back. And it's not determined whether we will win or not, but people are being driven to the point where they will have to fight back if they're going to survive.
Well, thank you, Mike. We're out of time. If people want to get in touch with you, sign up for some of the April 30th stuff.
Alewitz@gmail.com, ALEWITZ, or go to my Facebook page, and then soon we'll have other places to go.
Well, thank you for coming on, and
always a pleasure, and allowing me to rant about capitalism.
It isn't working.
No, but people know. More people understand that than at any time in my life.
Some progress.
Yeah.
Next week, my guest will be Trina Charles from Step Up New London. We'll see you then. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.